What kind of ropes did you have?
Yeah, it was pretty fundamental. But I want to answer that before I go on. I want to just say that we were just pretty ordinary people who were in love with climbing. Okay, and even the half-god status is very embarrassing. I just want to make that point.
Not my words.
Okay, I know. Since they've been repeated, I'll just answer them. That's all. Yeah, the equipment was pretty fundamental, although of course much better than our predecessors. When I started climbing, I couldn't afford a rope, and frankly, once I took one off the side of a trucking cup, and it was just an old rope,
borrowed it.
An old manila hemp rope, and I was desperate, and I wanted to climb so much, and I used that, and I could only afford a couple pitons, so I bought a couple pitons, and I'd go up climbing by myself in the mountains, and I remember going to a place called Mount Williamson in the Angeles National Forest, and climbing up a gully, and I got to a hard spot, and I knocked the piton in, put the rope through the eye of the piton, and tied it back to me, and kind of tried to belay myself up past the hard part, and then I went back down and removed the piton. So I couldn't even afford a carabiner. And the carabiners in those days were, the ones that were available immediately to us were made of steel. They were thin and reasonably light, but they were Army surplus. And
from the 10th Mountain Division?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, and not bad. Not bad. And somewhere along the way, I don't know, several years after I got into climbing, I found some shop in Los Angeles that actually sold, it was some sort of outdoor shop that sold climbing equipment. That was pretty rare in those days.
But then what was the next stage of ropes?
Well,
the old Gold Line?
We started out by buying, it seemed like it was Gold Line from Army surplus stores.
Which was?
And it was stiff and three-strand. It was twisted construction. You have three strands that are wrapped around each other.
Kind of like just slightly less than steel cable, I guess.
Yeah, right. It was about 7/16 inch diameter was the standard for leading on, and 5/16, I think, for to use as a rappelling line or things like that. Okay, and then the ropes we had other offerings, more supple ropes made by, I think, Plymouth Rope Company that were not so stiff and sometimes preferable. And I can remember a few things, but mostly it was pretty much the same thing. Fairly stiff, twisted nylon ropes of sometimes white, sometimes Gold Line. And in let's see, when was it? It must have been, I guess in the early '60s. I think when we did El Capitan in 1960, we had the old what we call old-fashioned ropes then. It was shortly thereafter that the new ropes, the kern mantle construction, came on the market, and those were wonderful. They were supple, they were colorful, they were easy to use, they were stronger and more elastic, more resilient. And they had, since they had they had the important part of the rope inside, which are a lot of filaments, long filaments inside of a covering that protected them. So it was definitely a step up in climbing rope manufacture.
What about beaners?
Carabiners, it's hard for me to remember very much. I remember the Army surplus carabiners, and sometime after that, aluminum carabiners came on the market, but I don't have much of a recollection, except I'm sure we used them on Half Dome. What we used before then, I'm not clear about.
And shoes, you started out in what kind of shoes when you started climbing?
Well, I started climbing with the Boy Scouts in the High Sierra, and I just used hiking shoes then. When we got into quote-unquote real climbing, where I was going out and practicing, I tried a number of, when I could afford it, different tennis shoes or that type of shoe, and I found that what they were identified as basketball shoes worked the best for adhering to rock. And of course, they couldn't edge on them. It was all smearing, just like using your bare foot. And but we learned how to smear pretty well, and we could climb anything in those, and anybody could climb anything else.
And you continued to go there, and you met from my memory, Warren Harding was climbing.
Yeah.
Chuck Pratt. Yvonne Chenard, Tom Frost.
By the late 50s, they all were.
In that, but I mean, as you were
Yes.
beginning to do
Yeah.
El Cap, that was sort of the crowd that kind of gathered there, whatever.
Yeah, Mike Sherrick and Jerry Gall was from Southern California with me. Gary Hemming was fairly early on the scene there too.
And most of those, or maybe all of them, are still about one place or the other, are they not?
Most of those are, yeah.
That crowd, interestingly.
Yeah, scattered but around.
Well, that's what I mean. They're still alive and
Yeah.
around, and one place or the other. Jerry is he at the meeting? I'm not sure.
Jerry is here.
Yeah.
Yes, first time I've seen him in, at least 30 years.
When you looked at El Cap and looked at that huge, long stretch of, obviously in the summertime, hot rock, or in colder months, cold rock, what was the inspiration to get up it and start the greatest climbing tradition in this country, in history?
Well, we wanted to do something new and significant. We wanted adventure. We saw this giant, this giant adventure land just standing there, 3,000 feet high, about 3,000 or so feet wide. It was just there. It was just like a giant canvas. It was asking, to have a route painted on it, so to speak. And it was a total mystery. Nobody had been on it. We began to study it and began to see opportunity there, and one thing fit to another, and we saw the elements of this great route, and it was extremely exciting. I mean, I don't know if I'll ever have, such an anticipation, or ever had any such anticipation on any other climb the way we did the southwest face of El Cap, which we subsequently named the Salathe Wall in honor of John Salathe. It was a great adventure.
Yeah, Chuck has said that there's never be another time like that, and for himself and the people that he was climbing with in those days of hanging out there. How did most people support themselves?
I think pretty similarly to the way Liz and I did. We worked in the winter, or in some cases the fall and part of the spring, and climbed the rest of the year. Some climbers got part-time jobs in Yosemite Valley, like Joe Fitchin, so we'd climb, right there and work there too. Herb Swedlin was another of that type.
Right. So then, after Yosemite, you next went to France or to the Alps, or?
Yeah, pretty early. We went to the Alps, I believe, in 19. I think it was 62. It might have been 63, and I climbed there with Gary Hemming. We went down, climbed in the Calanques, and he and I climbed in the Alps. That's when we made a new route on the west face of the Drew. I'd gone over to the Alps hoping to learn how to be an ice climber, because they have so much of that there, and we don't have so much in California. But the rock climbing, especially the potential of doing new things, was so attractive. I just did that instead.
Well, did you make friends in those days that you still, some of the French climbers or others there, or was that just your California crowd?
Yeah, I made friends with English climbers. I couldn't speak French.
Yeah.
And the English climbers and the Americans, they formed natural allies there because we had the same language, and particularly the English climbers knew more for the most part about about the French Alps than we did, being close. It was their Yosemite, so to speak.
But you were the best climbers, were you not, from your Yosemite experience?
We were certainly the best at technical big wall climbing, because they didn't have much experience in that. As far as free climbing, especially free climbing without a lot of protection close to you, there's no question, but the English excelled in those days.
And did you learn ice climbing?
Some. I did some. I wouldn't consider myself a leading ice climber by any means, but I wanted to do alpinism, and I've done a number of climbs with mixed conditions.